Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Presley Mania. My name is Rhonda and today we are going to be talking about one of Elvis's famous jumpsuits. And this particular jumpsuit has got a lot of people who have been attached to it. So let me kind of run through the list really fastly. There was Jimmy Velvet, there was Elvis's dad, there was also Priscilla, GWS Auctions, a famous Las Vegas auction, Lisa Marie Presley, and even her son Benjamin all had something to do with this suit, or there was something that connected all of them to it. So let's get started, shall we? The original suit that I'm talking about, like I said, is the eyelet suit or the double porthole. It was a white jumpsuit and it had a matching cape that was lined in red. Sometimes Elvis would wear this suit with the lion head belt or the Russian eagle belt. But the very first time he ever wore this suit was at a very, very famous concert. And that was the 1972 Madison Square Garden concerts. He wore that suit at one of those shows. So how in the world would a suit that is that, I almost dropped my iPad. How in the world did that suit wind up in a private collector's hands? Wouldn't you think that something of that magnitude would have been kept in the archives at Graceland and would have been on display for fans to see? But it's not. So what happened? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. First of all, Jimmy Velvet was the one who ended up with the suit originally after it left the hands of Graceland. And I'm just a guess because I could not find anything in all of my searching, and believe me, I tried to find out exactly how Jimmy wound up with it. But I do know that Jimmy Velvet was very good friends with Elvis. He met him when Jimmy was 16 years old, and I believe Elvis was 19, 20, somewhere around that particular time in his life. So Elvis would have just been getting started in the business of rock and roll. Anyway, he and Jimmy forged a friendship. Jimmy stayed in contact with them for years and years and years, and he was even really close to Vernon. One of the articles I read said that when he would come to Memphis, a lot of times he would stay at Vernon's house and spend the night. And so they had also forged a very close bond. So let's fast forward again to 1977. As you all know, August of 77 is when Elvis left us. Jimmy wanted to do something. He wanted to stop, I guess, doing his shows, and he decided one night, spur of the moment, that he wasn't gonna continue to tour, and that he wanted to open up an Elvis Presley museum. And he announced it at a show that night, much to the surprise of the band, of the people in his band, and all of the people helping him put together the tour, that he was done, and this was his last show. And so then, what did he do? He followed the dream that he had, and that was to open up Elvis and Elvis Presley Museum. And where was that museum located? It was located directly across the street from Graceland. And he opened it up with Vernon's blessing. Jimmy also gave an interview on Elvis Infonet, and they asked him some questions, and he said, they asked him, what about your famous memorabilia collection? Didn't you have to sell the majority of it? And this was Jimmy's answer, and this is important because we're going to trace what has happened to that jumpsuit and how it is wound up where it is now. Okay, Jimmy Velvet's answer to that question of why did he have to sell the majority of his memorabilia was, he said, at one time, my memorabilia collection was the largest in the world, but of course, I had to sell a lot of it off. He said, and now I've retired. He said, a bad business deal wound up breaking me and just took everything I could make, and so I ended up having to sell almost everything and just start over again. And then he went on to say that he had the Elvis Museum for almost 20 years, and he said during that time he never took a salary, and that he had another business that brought him in some money, and he took the money he made from the Elvis Museum and he reinvested it into Elvis memorabilia. So how did he wind up with the eyelet jumpsuit? I don't know. I know that Vernon loaned him some things to display at the first museum he had. He ended up having several. But at the first museum that was across the street from Graceland, Vernon had indeed loaned him some things to put on display. Jimmy owned this jumpsuit. So he must have purchased it straight from Vernon, would be the only thing I can think. Because he says here that Jimmy Velvet, who owned the world famous Elvis Presley Museum, once owned Elvis's Madison Square Garden porthole eyelet jumpsuit, and he later sold it at auction, and it was in lot 1431 in the Red Book catalog, page 68. And you can, if you find that catalog from that auction, you can see a photograph of the suit. And the auction where he sold most of his memorabilia was held on October 6th and 7th of 1995 in Las Vegas, Nevada. At one time, Jimmy owned 11 of Elvis's jumpsuits. That's quite a lot, and I would think those probably cost him a pretty penny. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that auction. The auction that was held was also in Nevada, also had Elvis's Hagstrom V2 guitar that he played in the 68 comeback special. Do y'all remember that one? The famous red, beautiful guitar? Well, it ended up selling in that auction. The suit that I had been talking about, it was a cream colored with gold colored studs and red satin ornamentation. That's the suit. Was sold for $68,000 somewhere. Let's see. It sold for $68,500, and that was higher, $8,500 higher than the top pre-sale estimate. And it sold for that much despite its discoloration, moth damage, and missing studs. So that's very interesting. So I don't know if when Jimmy had it, if it ended up, getting moth holes and stuff in it, because, back then we didn't know how to preserve things like they do now, and Graceland has gotten so good at taking care of things, but it didn't start off that way. Originally, things were, they weren't preserved correctly. And now I think Graceland is doing a really good job of preserving things. But back then, I guess Jimmy didn't have it preserved correctly either. So anyway, after that auction, it wound up in a private collector's hands. Now, let's go back. I need to go and look at some of my other notes that I had made on this particular suit. We need to fast forward to GWS auctions. because this suit comes back into play again, and more recently than not. And I had talked to Stephen Schutz, and he had quite a backstory on this suit. He wrote this article September 5th of 2021, and I wanted to read to you his article so that you'll know a little bit more about this suit and why GWS auctions kind of came under fire. And Priscilla was part of them at this time when this suit came up for auction again. Okay, so this is why people are a little, how shall I say it? They've got some real misgivings where GWS auction is concerned, because they have been accused of selling fake items. They have been accused of shill bidding. And this particular auction that they held, that this suit was a part of, a lot of people feel like that there was some shill bidding going on. So let's talk about that. I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to go ahead and read you his article that he wrote on September 5th of 2021. And it's called Elvis Presley Eyelet Jumpsuit and More. He said the verdict is still out regarding if the Elvis jumpsuit is a real sale, as Bridget Cruz of GWS Auctions has a history of fabricating sales that supposedly existed but never actually happened at auction. The EP Desert Jet, the EP 1976 motorcycle, etc. On press releases generated by Bridget Cruz, GWS touting world record sales that never actually happened. One thing for sure is items were shilled, which is a felony. Case in point, a film-worn outfit with a reserve of $25,000 was suddenly run to $47,000, but becomes a pass. If you understand auctions, you will understand clearly the house, GWS, that's who the house is in this instance, ran the bids to an inflated number to most likely bolster a potential sale of another film piece in the same auction. The bidders I spoke with this evening, so it must have been the night of the auction, several savvy auction bidders are convinced they were shilled. They were not bidding against a fellow collector, but were bidding against the auction house who were bidding on their consigned items. Auctioneers have gone to prison for this practice. Google documented cases of shilling. Now, to answer, apparently he had written a previous post. So he says, now to answer the previous post, T's title on how GWS Auctions, the FBI, Priscilla Presley, Benjamin Keogh, and the Elvis Eyelet Jumpsuit are connected. Okay, so I've already told you how Vernon and GWS were connected, but he also said he didn't mention Lisa Marie is also connected. So I'm going to read to you what he says, and then all the pieces of the puzzle are going to fall into place. Stephen goes on to say, unfortunately, this is not a trivia question, but a sad commentary on a soulless, narcissistic, unstable person, in my opinion. That's Stephen's opinion. Bridget Cruz of GWS Auctions. That's who he was referring to. Okay, y'all listen to this, because this is sad. When Benjamin Keogh committed suicide, Bridget Cruz told me she saw an opportunity to get the attention of Priscilla Presley by auctioning off a luncheon or something similar with Priscilla involved. Per Bridget, the proceeds would go towards a charity regarding suicide prevention. That's all fine and good, except Bridget made it clear to me she really didn't care so much about Benjamin's death. As to her, it was an opportunity to solidify Priscilla as an endorser of sorts for an GWS auction of Elvis memorabilia. By Priscilla agreeing to the auction of a luncheon, it would appear she was endorsing GWS. First problem is, Bridget attempted to contact Lisa Marie. Lisa Marie blew her off. Yay, Lisa. Rightfully so. Imagine the conversation. Hey, Lisa, up to auction yourself off to have lunch with fans and the money goes to a suicide prevention program in your son's name? Lisa would be left wide open to answer questions about Ben to fans that potentially would have no couth. Let alone, she would not be emotionally prepared to endure such a request. Bridget at one point claimed EPE wanted her to be their auctioneer when they were in the auction business, but then she stated EPE would never return her call regarding Priscilla. Odd. Rule number 1 about lying. Remember the first lie, so you don't trip yourself up in the second lie. Bridget proceeded to tell me she was going to hang out at a clothing store she knew Priscilla frequented, as her friend owned the shop and she planned to casually run into her to strike up a conversation. Fast forward. Somehow, Priscilla got bamboozled and agreed to the luncheon. Thus, the luncheon with Priscilla in Saturday's auction that had the eyelet suit up for bid. Most disgusting, though, is attempting to capitalize on a victim of depression and ultimately suicide with a luncheon meet and greet. If you actually give he used an expletive, so I'm going to say if you actually give a dang, write a check to the organization. Equally disturbing, in my opinion, is when someone claims to have cancer when they actually do not. As in the case of Bridget, when I professionally explained there was a very sizable error in the last check she owed me from several months ago for providing contacts for memorabilia, etc., as she had minimal connection to the Elvis world, as she claimed to have had all along. She did not know the whereabouts of key artifacts, knew nothing about authenticating, nor knew Elvis people or high-end buyers. Thus, me being hired as a consultant authenticator, although she rarely listened on the latter as she didn't care as long as she was making money, I had to explain to her Patsy Presley and Patsy Anderson are not the same person. This is one mere example of failing Elvis 101. When I professionally requested to discuss the oversight of thousands of dollars she owed me, she went exorcist, claiming she was just diagnosed with cancer and was dying, and how dare I ask for my money. Her husband backed her up on the story. Strangely, 2 days later, she contacted a known Elvis World memorabilia dealer she professed to me prior she vehemently hated and told him she was desperate for Elvis memorabilia for her auction, but couldn't deliver because she had just had a heart attack. Thought it was cancer. That story was told to me by the known memorabilia dealer. Strangely, people who know Bridget stated they have heard nothing about cancer or a heart attack. I'll assume pathologically lying to avoid paying money owed is acceptable to some people, or just simply a ploy, as she had my contacts at this point. Oh, and the FBI connection? They are now involved regarding Bridget Cruz, GWS, illegally shilling, and potential fraudulent activity. The substantial amount of money she owes me, I'm sure I'll never see. But at least now you know the rest of the story. Stephen Schutz. Whoa. That's quite a story. So let's talk about this a little bit. Did Bridget really sell the suit? It sold for over $1 million. I had the exact amount written down somewhere. And I don't have it close. Let's see. I don't have it right here in front of me. I apologize, guys, but it was for over $1 million. It was the suit and the cape. So Stephen is saying, did she really sell it? Or did they shill the bid? Did they kick it up so high that we don't know if anyone actually got it? Who knows? Who knows? But what I think is even extremely horrible is the fact that she really wasn't into Elvis memorabilia. She was calling people using things like cancer and heart trouble, and she just to make $1. And Priscilla aligned herself with this woman. Maybe she didn't know at the beginning, but I'm sorry. If I knew that some woman had contacted my daughter right after my grandson had committed suicide and wanted her to hold a luncheon for suicide prevention just so she could sell something and make a bigger profit, is wrong. But then she plots her course and she ends up meeting Priscilla at supposedly at a shop that she frequented, and she just accidentally ran into her? I think not. Struck up a conversation, and lo and behold, Priscilla decides that she'll do it. She'll do the luncheon. Oh my gosh, at the expense of her grandson. I'm sorry, y'all, but I think that's wrong. And then they end up forging this alliance, the two of them, and go on and do many, many, many auctions. There are so many things that have caused speculation. For instance, there was a collection of jewelry that the Colonel had. It was called the Lost Collection of Jewelry. It's quite unsure how Priscilla and GWS Auctions came about getting it. But we know that part of the collection was owned, if not all of it, was owned by Greg McDonald at one time, who he has just written a book called Elvis, his relationship about Elvis and the Colonel. And I'm in the process of reading that now, and I may do a show about it later and tell y'all what I thought about the book. But anyway, from The Nation, I found an article that was written, and Priscilla tells them that this collection the Colonel's wife had, Loanne Parker was the Colonel's wife. Loanne Parker passed, and a certain person had taken it and kept it away and hid it for a while, and we found it. And because of that, it's all laid out and all exposed now. Okay, what? Say that again. So the Colonel's wife had a collection of jewelry that Elvis had given to the Colonel. It was supposedly lost, so obviously it was never lost. From what I understand, Greg McDonald had inherited part of it, all of it, some of it, I'm not sure. How did GWS Auctions and Priscilla wind up with it? Did they buy it? Did they find it? I don't know. Write down below in the comments what you think happened. I have no idea. I hope Greg ended up getting some type of monetary compensation for that jewelry, and that he sold off a part of it. But did he sell off all of it? Or just a parcel? I don't know. If some of you know, please let me know. I'm beyond curious about what all has happened to all of this jewelry that they sold at an auction. It's quite mind-blowing. The lengths that people will go to try to make a buck. Anyway, I hope y'all have enjoyed this segment. It has been my privilege to be able to bring you some of this information. Please let me know what you think. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I hope you will do so. It really would help me a lot. Y'all have a wonderful day. And remember, you only get one shot at this life. Live it to the fullest and enjoy every single day. Talk to you all soon. God bless everyone. Goodbye.